Hi, I'm Jen Albertson, and welcome to the first episode of My Life with MS. Today, I'll be sharing my journey from the very beginning. I started this podcast because, just like you and anybody listening, this whole situation can be extremely overwhelming. When I was younger, I did not know what multiple sclerosis was. I didn't know what an MRI was, really. I didn't know what infusions were. I didn't know anything. And being thrown into this so aggressively at the time of the diagnosis, I had to really learn everything quickly and on my own. So for anybody listening who has just been diagnosed or you're coming up with a diagnosis, this podcast is for you. I have been where you are. I've been at that stage where you simply do not know what to expect, what's going to happen, what's around the corner. This podcast and this episode and all of my episodes are really to show you that you're not alone in this. And there's a huge community of people that are ready to help you and answer questions and welcome you into a family of people who have been where you're at today. I would say my very first symptom started back in high school. I had dental work almost my whole life up until my senior year. I had a lot of dental work. I got my braces removed and I got 2 permanent retainers put in, one on the top and one on the bottom. About a week or so later, I was sitting in art class, and I remember it was springtime and graduation's around the corner, and I remember seeing black floaters in my right eye. Those black floaters continued to grow, and eventually it took over all of my vision in my right eye. At the time, my teacher had pulled me aside. She knew something was wrong, and I told her, I think I have a bad headache and I can't see out of my right eye, and she told me that I had an optical migraine. She gave me a warm washcloth to put over my eyes, and I rested in her office in the darkness for about 5 to 10 minutes. After 5 to 10 minutes went by, I was able to kind of regain my vision in that eye. It came back slowly. Then it came back fully, and I went on with my day. And ever since then, I always thought that was an optical migraine. Fast forward about 6 or 7 years, that actually happened one more time. And this time, I lost my vision in both my eyes. And I lost it for about 30 minutes. I remember when it happened, I called my sister and I was telling her this is an optical migraine. And I just understood that it's going to go through this process and my vision's going to come back, which it did, thankfully. And again, that was about 30-minute experience. Then, fast forward even one more time, I was 27 years old and those black floaters showed up, and there was about 3 or 4 of them that showed up. In the past, it was always one. And that one grew and it took over all of my eyesight. When I was 27, I saw maybe about 3 or 4. And the problem with that is that they didn't go away. So it showed up randomly one day and they appeared again the next day and the next day. So those didn't go away. At the same time, I was having a lot of tingling and numbness down my left side. It was down my left arm, down my left leg. And then a third issue at the same time was that I had randomly lost my taste. I couldn't taste anything. I remember almost vividly trying to eat an Oreo and not being able to taste it. And we all know how Oreos taste. They're delicious. And I couldn't believe that I couldn't taste it. And then I remember putting peanut butter on the Oreo to be like, okay, if I can't taste the Oreo, maybe I can taste the peanut butter. And that also didn't work. So I definitely lost my taste. This is back in 2019. So I had a trifecta. I lost my taste, I had black floaters in my right eye, and I had numbness and tingling down my left side. When this lasted more than 3 days, that is when I decided to go to the doctor. So I ended up going to the doctor. I let her know what my symptoms were. She referred me to a neurologist almost the next day, a quick turnaround. So then I went and saw the neurologist. I explained those symptoms to the neurologist, and she scheduled an emergency MRI. Of course, they expedited the insurance, approvals, everything. To them, they were panicked. I wasn't in any physical pain, but I did have these weird symptoms. They weren't going away, and I didn't really quite understand what they were looking for, but okay. So then I go in. An MRI is a non-invasive medical imaging test that produces detailed images of almost every internal structure in the human body. But for this particular test, they were looking specifically at my brain and my spine. I do remember going in for these MRIs. I was in there for a long time. I think I was in there for over an hour. I got 3 MRIs done, my brain, and there were 2 spine MRIs that were done. Now, I've never done an MRI before. You go through all the MRIs once, and then you get contrast in you, and then you do all the MRIs again with contrast. And what they're looking for is that the contrast actually lights up any existing current inflammation in the brain and in the spine. So I was in the MRI machine for a very long time. I do remember the mental load that was hitting me as I was in the MRI machine. I did not understand what was going on. That's probably my biggest frustration at that time. Again, 27 years old, I'm not involved in the medical realm at all. I didn't know what was happening to me. I didn't understand the terms they were using. I just simply didn't know. And all I knew is that what I was being told was that I was too young to be here, essentially. So I remember being in the MRI machine where you're laying flat. You have a little bump under your legs to keep your legs elevated. And I have the IV in my arm and contrast is going through my body. And I'm in this loud machine. For all of you who have been in an MRI machine, you understand the explosive noises that come through that machine. It is so loud in there, and there's nothing you can do about it. You have to lay extremely still. So while in the MRI machine, I remember being extremely overwhelmed. I was full to the max with anxiety. I was scared. I was trembling. What is going on with me? What are they looking for? Is it cancer? I don't know. I still didn't understand what was going on. So as I'm sitting in there, I remember crying, and you can't see anything around you. If you open your eyes, you feel very claustrophobic because that wall, you're in a tube basically, and that tube, there's only a few inches between your face and the top of that tube. And there's nothing you could do about it. You're stuck in there for these hours during the MRI. So I remember sitting in there and mentally freaking out. What is this life going to be like? What are they going to find? The next day, the MRI results were received. I got called back into the neurologist's office, and I sat down. My husband was with me, and the neurologist very bluntly, this is what I remember, very bluntly said, "You have 15 lesions in your brain, and you have 3 that are active." And then she said something about you have X amount of lesions in your spine. And when she said that I have something in my brain, I'm pretty sure I blacked out. I heard her incorrectly. I just didn't understand it, honestly. I think I blacked out because I don't remember anything she said after that. I hung on to there's an issue with my brain, and I started bawling. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. And I'm sitting there and I'm crying, and I mean, she's a doctor. I don't think she's not consoling me or anything. But she does go over the next steps. The next steps are the treatment options. Because the lesions in my spine were so large, they were very, very concerned. She said things along the lines of, with the amount of damage that you have, you could be in a wheelchair within 5 years. So I remember hearing that there was issues with my brain, and then I remember hearing that I'm going to be in a wheelchair. And those two combined completely broke me. I, again, still didn't understand what was going on. What were they looking for? She did say you have multiple sclerosis. I did not understand what that meant. And I think in my brain, I was thinking it was scoliosis. And I thought there was something wrong with my spine in that aspect, with my bones. I just didn't understand. And hopefully I'm not alone in that. She threw out the different treatment options. Her recommendation was to go at it as aggressively as possible. The best one on the market was a treatment called Tisabri. So she sent us home with a packet of information. I was completely devastated. I did not understand still. Driving home, I didn't understand what was going on. I don't know if my husband understood what was going on. I'm sure he did, but I just didn't know where to go from here. I think I cried that entire night out of frustration, sadness, not knowing what was going to happen to me, and still being so, so young. I think I was about a year or two into my marriage. So newly married, starting our lives together, and now there's an issue with my brain and I could be in a wheelchair. Those are the two things I hung on to. Regardless of what the real conversation was, and if it went fairly well for the neurologist, if she got everything she needed to tell me, in that moment, in that meeting, I did not take that information in. I just took in those 2 points. There's an issue with my brain. I'm going to be in a wheelchair in 5 years. So then fast forward to they expedited all the treatment approvals through insurances, and I started treatment very, very quickly. I'm sitting in what's called the infusion room. And the infusion room, they try to make it look pretty nice. It's comfortable. It has big chairs, recliners, and TVs and things to read, all that stuff. Because people are usually in infusions for anywhere from 30 minutes to 8 hours. So I'm sitting there with a group of other women, and I'm hooked up to a machine. They're explaining to me, I'm signing stuff. Again, just still in shock of everything that has happened in the last week. But I'm sitting there with other women, and all of them, I don't want to talk to anybody. I'm a mess. I don't want to even think about being there right now, right at that moment. But all of the women had things to say, and I'm not mad at them, but they all said, "You are way too young to be here." And they were asking these questions, yes, I have MS. I was 27 years old. The women next to me were older, much, much older. They all had MS. And unfortunately, they didn't look like they were in good shape. Some of them were in a wheelchair. Some of them were walking with canes. Of course, they were much, much older, probably twice my age. And that all really hit me extra hard because in that moment, that's what I thought my future was. That's my future. My future is that wheelchair. My future is this room. My future are these treatments. And that was really hard. It was really hard to sit there. And so I go through this first round of Tisabri. And at the time, they pump you full of pre-meds, and then you get the medication, and then you have after meds because your body can and might react to it adversely. You might have bad reactions. So you have Benadryl on hand, you have all these things. All right, first infusion went well, according to them. I was emotionally a mess. I was probably at my lowest point in my life in that infusion chair, just in panic mode over what my future looked like. I was in complete fear of my future. So I did the first one, and then I went back for the second round of the first infusion 2 weeks later. So I go back, and I'm sitting in that chair, and what happens next is going to be in the next episode. If you are considering Tisabri, you're considering these treatment options, please subscribe to this podcast, and please follow through and listen to this next episode that I'm going to cover, Tisabri and what it did to me. You need to be informed as much as possible before you decide to do any of these treatments for MS or any treatments for any chronic illness. I will cover what the second portion of that infusion did to me in the next episode. Right now, I really want to take a step back and reflect on how quickly my experience went from the time I had just funniness in my arm, weird spots in my eye, all the way through to that second infusion was a matter of weeks. And that is not enough time for a human to process mentally what is happening to them. Mentally to learn about this brand new disease to them, right? I've never heard of it before. Learn all the terms, learn why I'm getting an MRI, learning what a lesion is. If you don't know what a lesion is basically scar tissue after MS takes over and damages a series of nerves. Once that damage exists, it creates a scab, basically. That scab is then called a lesion. When that scab grows, or when that damage grows and the scab is there, that's when you lose your mobility, you lose certain things because the nerves cannot fire back and forth. So over time, you get a lesion. Over time, that lesion grows, and it cuts off the communication between your nerves. But I know that now, but at the time, I thought a lesion, I know, this is crazy, I thought a lesion was a growth. So when she told me I had 15 lesions, I thought those were growths of something. I thought that was like a cancer growth, a tumor growth. Again, I didn't understand it. And It sounds so naive, but like when you are up for a diagnosis, the best advice I can give you is to reach out to this community and talk to somebody who has been living with it for years. Talk to somebody who knows the terms. Talk to somebody who can guide you and help you. I would absolutely love to create a community where we can engage with each other and help each other through those first steps, because I just didn't know how big this community was until I found it online. And there's a lot of people with a lot of experience who can help you slow down and really consider your options. For me, I was signing papers. I was taking everything my neurologist said as truth, and it was very fear-driven. I dove into it scared that if I didn't do this, I was going to be in a wheelchair. We live up here in Alaska. We completely take advantage of the outdoors. And I remember on the drive home after that diagnosis came through that all of those things that I love to do were taken from me. So I was instantly grieving my future. And I was grieving my future for a long time. And treatments for MS are a double-edged sword. The treatments for MS are supposed to be a proactive process. It's going to prevent lesions from happening. At the same time, these treatments are extremely aggressive. Some of these treatments can have adverse effects, which we will get into in my next episode. Thank you so much for joining me on my first episode of My Life with MS. I hope my story has given you some insight and some inspiration to slow down. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. There's a whole community out there that understands and supports you. If you found this episode helpful or interesting, please subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an update. Share with your friends or family or anyone who might benefit from hearing these stories. Your support means the world to me and helps this community grow. Together, we can navigate the challenges of MS, find hope in the darkest moments, and celebrate our victories, no matter how small. So hit the subscribe button and let's continue this journey together. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.